Random thoughts. And in this video, we are going to talk about why most of the game reserves or most of the game parks in Kenya, and I would say even in Tanzania, are found on the land that is, we can say, owned by the Maasai or is supposed to be owned by the Maasai people. Why is that so? Ever ask yourself, why is that so? Of course, there are game parks that are outside what you can call the Maasai territory. But the ones that really stand out mostly are those that are within the regions that are occupied by the Maasai people. And even those that we think are outside the Maasai region, if you look carefully or try to look carefully, you realize that they are actually within the Maasai region. For example, if you look at the northern part of Kenya, either they are the Maasai people or closely related to the Maasai people or people who have traditions that are very close to the Maasai. Why is that so? That is so because the culture of the Maasai is in such a way that it doesn't destroy the environment. It's not that it actually actively protects it, but it doesn't need to destroy the environment for it to survive, the culture and the people. And the big part to that is diet. I've read several documents or written maybe in the mid and late 19th century describing the land of Kenya. The land was mostly full of wild animals, but still the land that was occupied by the Maasai people had even more of these animals. And the reason why is because I've come to conclude that is because of the diet. The Maasai, even though they are changing now, are very particular on what they eat. The Maasai don't eat just anything. They are very particular on their food. And the other people are not so particular. The other people eat very different types of foods. They are not as particular. Of course, every community or every society is particular when it comes to food. But the Maasai is so particular, more particular than the other people. And when I say particular, I mean Maasai generally feed on flesh and milk for the most part as traditional food. What that means is because it's flesh and milk, number one, it means they don't have to dig or to cultivate the land, which means they leave the land for the most part to be the way it is because they don't need to cultivate it. That has been good for the wild animals because then there is no competition between humans and the wild animals as far as using the land. The way the wild animals are using the land is the way the people are using the land. That means they use the land to graze the animals, so they don't need to change it for their use. They just leave it, it rains, the grass grows, they feed the animals. The animals of the wild also feed on the grass, and there is no change there. But when it comes to the other people, there is cultivation because they need grains for the most part. And now cultivating the land changes it significantly. And when it changes significantly, of course, the wild animals can't feed on that ground because the humans have cultivated the land, they are growing crops, and now they wouldn't want the animals to come and feed on those crops, of course. It doesn't make sense, economical sense. So the wild animals are basically eliminated or chased away from that part of the land. Now, that's part one. Part two, the Maasai are very particular also with their flesh. They eat only cow, goat, sheep, only. That's all the flesh the Maasai eat. They don't eat any other. They don't eat birds, they don't eat fish, they don't eat wild animals, antelopes, giraffes, whatever. They don't eat those. In fact, it looks so much down upon if you eat those. Like it's so disgusting to the Maasai for you to eat anything that is besides goats, sheep, and cattle. So because of that, they have no need to hunt the wild animals because they didn't have any use for it really. They just saw them there, but they have their own sheep, goat, and cows to feed on. And it's disgusting even to think about eating the wild animals. So that protects the wild animals from being destroyed. And if you look closely, the other people had the culture of hunting the wild animals for flesh. And of course, what does that mean? Killing them. And the more the population grew, the more these activities became intensive. And of course, the more animals were killed, and of course, they were killed, and there was no animal anymore and more. So the Maasai is eating, choosing to be particular with their food, only flesh, and not just any flesh, only goat, sheep, and cow, the animals they breed. They never bothered with the wild animals. They never bothered with the wild animals. And because of that, the wild animals survived around them because the Maasais were not interested in killing them for food. The Maasais were not interested in chasing them and doing anything to them as far as changing the use of the land. The land was just like that. And maybe the last one is that the Maasai, and I think this cuts across, it's just that the Maasai have maintained it longer than the rest of the people. The Maasai never believed that land could be owned by a human. It is odd. And this is an African thing, and I think that's why when the Europeans came along, they found it so easy to grab land because, and the people, it didn't occur to the people that these people were actually trying to own the land until it was too late. That's when they realized, oh, actually, these people have cut this land up and given it to themselves, and now they're calling it their own, and they are fencing it and saying, this is my piece of property. In Africa, generally speaking, there was nothing like owning land. Land belonged to God. Land was like water, was like air you breathe, like sun. These are natural resources that were just there. Nobody even imagined that you could just cut a piece and say, oh, now this is mine for good. You could use the land for those who do cultivation. You could just use the land, do your cultivation, harvest your crops. What belonged to you were the crops on the land, not the land itself. Do the cultivation, you are done with it, you have harvested. If you want to reuse it, you can reuse it. If you think the fertility has gone down, you can just abandon it and move to another place. And a few years down the road, somebody else will come and use the land that you used a few years ago. So the Maasai have maintained that until very recent when they've realized that other people are taking advantage of that because they realize the Maasai are not so much attached to the land at a personal level. Of course, they own the land as a people, but not so much as this space is mine and that space is yours. No, it's just like we are the people of this land and we can use this land to graze our animals, and the wild animals can graze if they want. It's not our land really, it's God's land. We are just using it to, to survive. That was the view. And because of that, they never, because the land was not subdivided, the wild animals survived until very recently when it's become like other people are taking advantage of that, chipping the land and fencing it, and it's my land. And that's now the Maasai are realizing, oh, looks like we need to do the same thing, which is unfortunate. I think the view that land is a natural resource, just like the sun, just like the air we breathe, I think it was a better way of seeing things. Those are my random thoughts.